Hey guys, it's me, Rachel. It's been a while since I've even really considered sitting down and recording anything recently just because of family things and just busy times that have come up this holiday season. But I am finally sitting down and recording something. Well, granted, it's going to be like a podcast, and I'm thinking of actually doing this more often. Ideally, I would like to have other people participate in these, but I can't exactly get that right now. So, right now it's just going to be me sort of babbling on to myself, and I'll try to keep it to as short as possible. But what I want to talk about today is something I talked about in the past, and I actually uploaded a video about it, but I actually deleted it for the sake of actually editing issues. I actually had like two clips that said the exact same thing, just worded differently next to each other. And I was like, okay, that's not professional, let's delete that. And so I haven't gotten around to re-uploading it because I had the idea of making this because I thought on camera, my camera only records for about 12 minutes each, so I'm under like severe pressure to get my words out and efficiently. So I thought, I'm just going to make like a podcast of this when I'm just sort of relaxed and I can kind of talk for as long as I want to get my words out and sort of express my feelings towards this really sensitive topic. And this really sensitive topic is kind of Steve Downie's Twitter rant, or I should say the second part of his Twitter rant. And also, I should say, just the culture of the NHL. I guess you could sum this up in just like the simple term of like, oh, this is about concussions, because it pretty much is. It's about concussions and violence, I guess you could probably say, in the NHL, and that's what I'm going to talk about. So, I'm not going to go through and talk specifically about each of Steve Downie's tweets, mainly because I forgot which ones I have already previously discussed, but I think it's good for just a good read for yourself, just to go through all of his tweets from the beginning of, I think, a few weeks ago. It actually starts on the 22nd of December. If you read through those and they end on, let's see, it looks like the 26th of December. Just read through all of those. It's not too many. I would say it's only about like 20 tweets or so. It really paints a good picture of what's been going on, and it raises some really good issues. Or I should say, it really raises some good topics. And one of the topics is, this one's pretty easy to talk about, I guess you could say. It's probably the easiest to talk about of all of them, and will be the quickest to talk about, is concussions. Pretty much what I want to say about concussions is, back in the day, yes, we didn't know what was going on with concussions. I should say back in the day, pretty much up until, like, before pretty recent times, I would say probably almost kind of before the incident with Crosby, there really wasn't a lot of attention towards concussions, and people didn't really identify them as, I guess, important issues. Nobody really thought about, hey, a concussion is an issue where your brain hits your skull too hard, and nobody thought, hey, that could actually have some really bad impacts on people's lives if they continue to play a harsh physical game with that injury. So, I mean, of course we know that now, but the fact of the matter is that, like, we didn't know that, and we know it now, and the NHL just seems to really not want to fess up to it. I've heard from multiple people that pretty much the NHL doesn't want to accept that their sport causes concussions, even though it's clear that it does, because pretty much every sport causes concussions. But they just don't want to fess up to it, and it's kind of frustrating. I mean, it's very frustrating, especially because you see a lot of players from other leagues and other sports who have played physical games, especially football players, and they sustained so many concussions, never got good treatment for it, and now they're still pretty young guys. I mean, they're only like 40s, 50s, and they're suffering because of all the issues and sort of like injuries that they've gotten towards their brain, so they can't really function anymore. And it's horribly saddening to see. I mean, I even saw my dad like pretty much like start to tear up over one of his favorite Bears players, because now he just has so many problems functioning as a normal human being because of all the concussions he's sustained. And we're starting to see some of those stories come out for the NHL because players are now getting fed up and they're saying, hey, you know what? I never got treatment before and I want treatment now. Steve Downie discusses a couple of these stories, which I'm really glad he brought up, because at first his rant seemed just sort of like, it was just like he was angry at Tippett, he was angry at other people, but once he started bringing this stuff into it, it turned into a really, really great conversation to have. So, now the NHL is moving in the right direction, having spotters and having different protocols for concussions, which is great, and now we're starting to see more guys be out for concussions, and I know I'm not one of the players, I'm not behind the scenes, but I'm assuming that they're getting better treatment than they did before, which is great, but we're still not reversing the effects of what's already happened, and until years continue on, unfortunately, we don't really know how effective all of this treatment is going on, because who knows, a few years down from the road, we can see that maybe some certain players, possibly superstars, I should say, will come out and say, hey, you know what, I'm having a lot of these issues because, hey, guess what, I had a lot of concussions and I was still forced to play. Or I should say, I was still let to play, even though I had no idea I had a concussion, which is actually what happened in one of the news stories that Downie retweeted, involving Mike Peluso, I believe is how his name is pronounced. Former New Jersey Devil, he was an enforcer, and pretty much he was, as it's stated, he was not told that he had a concussion, and he continued to play his role of enforcer, even though the medical staff knew that he had a concussion. Now, of course, I don't think the knowledge of how bad concussions were known at the time, but still, he wasn't even allowed this information, which is a terrible, terrible situation. And again, if you want to, I think it's a really good read to go on through. It's in Downie's tweets, so if you happen to stop by his Twitter page, which you can find on the internet, but I will also link it in the description below, I think you'll run into it, and I think everything is pretty much a good read on Downie's Twitter account at this rate. So yeah, concussions are a terrible thing. I think we all pretty much know that. And the game is moving away, with rules and everything now, we're definitely moving away from the more physical brand of hockey that we used to play. Pardon my cliche of physical brand of hockey, but we're definitely moving away from that, and I think that's great, but I wouldn't say terrible, but I think it's not good at the same time. Yes, let's eliminate headshots. Let's sort of be like the double IHF, and any contact with the head, as long as it's actual contact with the head, because there have been calls in recent games against the USA and the World Juniors that haven't actually been contact with the head, but they call them as it. So that's frustrating. But the fact of the matter is, we should have a rule, much like in the double IHF, the ice hockey, or the International Ice Hockey Federation, in case you don't know who they are, that says that any contact with the head, I believe, is 2 minutes and then a misconduct, I believe is how it goes. Either way, I'm pretty sure you get tossed from the game if there's contact with the head, which I think is great, because if there's purposeful contact with the head, nothing good can really come from that. I don't think there's a reason to hit a guy in the head, so I think that's a good rule to have. And to continue on sort of the topic, this is sort of the main topic that I want to talk about, and I wanted to take up the majority of this little podcast, is the sort of culture involving hockey, or just, I should say, the hockey culture, and the culture within it and around it, ones that fans, players, coaches, everyone creates. And it's sort of a convoluted culture that I really have to cite Steve Dangle's podcast for. They sort of inspired me to think about this, and I thought about it more, and as they said, there's sort of this culture that you have to be a tough guy, and you have to go out there and play your hardest, and work. Even though you're injured, you still have to play. You can't let the team down, kind of thing. And that's still definitely true. That is an old world belief. We can't show emotion, we can't show weakness. So I think that's typically why sports are viewed as a male thing, because that's sort of a male stereotype that you're not allowed to show emotions. But that's a completely bigger issue. But there is that culture in hockey where you have to, especially I should say in hockey, that you have to be a tough guy. And with that culture comes the need to, I would say, be a player like Steve Downie, because while people might say, oh wow, because this is discussed sort of in his rant of how he said that he was forced to be the player that he was. Like, sort of, it wasn't his choice, it was like he said word for word in one of his tweets, I played how I had to play. So, if you don't necessarily have, like, the skill of Crosby, or, like, even, let's say, like, McDavid, you kind of have to be that grittier player. And he cited Don Cherry in his Rock'em Sock'em videos as sort of being that force that pushed him to be the player that he was, which he also notes was very embarrassing for him. Like, he specifically said that he wished he'd never played because of some of the injuries he laid on people, which, I mean, is a really sad thing to hear, because it's like, you never want to hear that a guy who had any type of career is just like, I wish I would have never played. And it's like, that's hurtful, because obviously he enjoyed the game, and he wants to just take that away from himself because of the pain that he caused. So, I mean, that says a lot about his character. No matter what you really think about Steve Downie or the type of player that he was, that's a very admirable, I would say, thing to think about him. So, there's this giant culture, but now the NHL is like, okay, apparently that's not working, because yes, there are now headshots being taken, there are just bad effects coming from players being injured, so they're like, yeah, we don't want this in our league anymore, so let's start funneling that out. But at the same time, they're also trying to blame it on fighting, they're blaming it on all sort of like physical hockey. You have people who are like, wow, we really need to cut down on sort of like the physicality in games, we need to get rid of fighting, and I sort of disagree with that. Because while I completely agree that being more physical raises your chances of being injured and all that, I do not believe, in the topic of concussions, I do not believe that all physical hockey leads to concussions. Because, I mean, what leads to concussions, at least in my opinion, is headshots. Because when you're hit in the head, I mean, all that force of the other guy is going towards your head, and there's a very, very high chance that your brain is going to get rattled around. As opposed to if it's sort of body contact, there's a much lower chance that your brain is going to get rattled around from that, when the rest of your body, which for most guys in the NHL is a pretty large build, pretty sturdy, I should say, so it's even less likely to happen. It's less likely that your brain is going to get rattled around, because you have more of yourself sustaining the hit than just the head. So I'm not saying we need to get rid of guys. So we definitely don't need to get rid of guys like Dustin Byfuglien or any of like the heavy hitters. I don't think that is a problem. I think that's a great part of the game. It's very exciting, and I mean, you don't hear a lot of people saying, oh wow, we need to take out the physical part of hockey, like, altogether. So I think that's not really an issue, but if any wise guy tries to come out and say we need to get rid of the physicality in hockey at all, I mean, there's my argument for that. It's not that likely that, because like for Sidney Crosby, a lot of people, I think, liked to blame, I think it was Victor Hedman who hit him in the game after he got hit in the head by an flying elbow, I should actually say. A lot of people like to blame, I believe, Victor Hedman for pounding him into the boards, but it was like, that was just a good hockey hit. Like, that wasn't, had Crosby not already sustained a concussion from the elbow, he wouldn't have been hurt by that hit. But given that he already had the problems, that hit just further induced the symptoms and the problems, and it just spiraled out of control, and all of a sudden we've lost our best player for 2 years. So, yeah, it's definitely, I don't think physicality is the problem. I think it's the type of physicality. Definitely headshots. Headshots need to go. I mean, I don't think there's really anybody who, understands medical issues and hockey that believes, hey, we should really still have headshots in there. Like, no one's actually going to think that. Like, yes, no one wants to get hit in the head. Like, that's just, there's no point to that. And as for no fighting, I don't think it's a good idea. I think, from what I've seen, I think everyone's seen this, but there's definitely been a decline of fighting already in the NHL, and I don't like that decline, honestly. I think it's partway in due to the fact I really have to cite, I should say, Pete Blackburn from Fox Sports for this idea, but I've seen him mention quite a few times that there's definitely been a decrease in fighting in the NHL, and I have to completely agree because a few nights ago, I would even say like last week, he's shown how it was Adam McQuaid and somebody else, and they tried to fight, and the refs just completely pushed them apart. Like, both of them had their gloves dropped, and it was like, really? It was like, these guys are both willing to fight, and you're splitting them apart. Like, it's almost like fighting is illegal now, and it's like you're not even allowed to do it. And I think that's completely dumb, because you need fighting, because what happens when guys are losing 7-1 in a game? I mean, obviously you can't score a goal or you're having trouble doing it. So, I mean, put that physical edge. I mean, that's what people need to do. I mean, if you take that out, what are you supposed to do? You're just going to sit there and, like, lay back and just, like, let them walk all over you. You're not allowed to do anything. Because it's like, you can't get payback, obviously, by scoring a goal, so how are you supposed to get payback? It also comes when people are taking liberties against your best player, I should say. So, I mean, like, what's going to happen when somebody runs into Connor McDavid? Milan Lucic isn't going to be there to fight him, so people are just going to keep running into the kid until, maybe he starts evading hits, he's injured, possibly, from all this. I mean, fighting stops a lot of stuff. I think fighting definitely has its place, but fighting just for the sake of almost just to fight, I think is what the NHL, if they're going to get rid of anything, they need to take that out. They need to be like, no, you know what, we're not just going to be reckless hooligans, there needs to be maybe a purpose to it. But at the same time, just from my point of view, I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of injuries that necessarily come directly just from fighting. I think fighting could possibly worsen your injuries if you already have one sustained, and that's a whole nother issue if you're able to play and fight if you already have an sustained injury, I should say. So, like, fighting is definitely not an issue, so I don't understand why the NHL is trying to cut back on that. It's really a non-issue. I think it's a big draw to the game. I mean, I definitely, especially since becoming a fan of the AHL, it's definitely been a big draw for me. I definitely enjoy being able, I should say specifically because I've gotten into the AHL, I've been able to go to more hockey games than ever before. And when you're going to those games, it's a little more fun to see a physical game. It's not just all the speed and the skill, and because it's like, yeah, I can see you guys stick handle as many times as I want, but it's just, personally, it's just not the same as seeing two dudes just like battle it out and, throwing some hands here and there. I mean, that's exciting. I think that's something, I mean, you don't get it in other sports. I mean, in baseball, you get it and people flip out. And people flip out about it in hockey, and I think that's a great draw to the game, because it's like, anybody you ever talk about, or like when you ever talk to somebody and you're like, oh yeah, I love hockey, and they're like, oh yeah, it's where like the dudes fight. Either they mention fighting, they mention no teeth, or they mention probably like weird greasy hair. Which, I mean, all three of those are true, and all three of those are a really big draw to the game. So you really don't want to, like, lose out on any of those three, especially the real one that is actually a big draw to the game, which is fighting. Because I don't know actually how many people actually come to games to see, like, toothless guys or guys with really weird, long, greasy hair. So, I mean, that's just me. And I mean, it's a tough issue, because if you look at Steve Downie's tweets and you're like, yeah, physicality is really a big deal. I don't like cheap shots. I don't like all this. I don't like all that. I don't like guys getting injured. I hate hearing, especially when you see guys who are retired or have retired early and all the issues that they have. You're like, if they wouldn't have been playing like this, like, they would still be around, or they would be living so much better. And it, like, really hurts your feelings. But at the same time, it's like, I really do like this game. I think everything just needs to be, it feels like a cop-out answer, but it all needs to be just in moderation. Like, let's not cut hockey completely out. Like, that's just kind of foolish, I think. Just, I just think that's foolish. Don't take the entire thing out. Just try to make it better. Like we made the rule to where you can't remove your helmet before a fight, which I think is a great rule. So let's just continue in that direction. Let's, make things safer without, it's sort of like saying, oh wow, kids are getting hurt on the playground, so like, let's not let them go out during recess. It's like, no, let's figure out why people are getting hurt specifically. And crack down on those specific things. Say like, wow, a lot of kids are getting hurt on the monkey bars, so let's teach them how to use them. Let's put monitors there, or let's, at the very end, if nothing is working, let's take the monkey bars out. You don't blame the whole system for one thing that is a problem. And I think that's a problem with the NHL, because they're just sort of like, hey, we're not really to blame for any of this, so let's just like push it away and just try to throw something together and try to make it better. When this is actually a serious issue, we probably should be tackling a little bit harder. So I gotta say thank you guys for listening to me sort of just ramble on for like 10 or so minutes. I mean, that means a lot. I hope you guys sort of like learned something from this. If you didn't, and you really want to learn something about it, I've linked quite a few articles and like specific tweets that I really think you should look at from Steve Downie's account, as well as from other accounts, other sites and everything. It's just, most of it revolves around concussions, because I know I kind of glazed over that this time as opposed to the video that I posted a while ago, but I think it's a really important topic because it's something I guess that's not really discussed, because I at least for myself, I know it's an issue, and I think other people understand that it's an issue. So it's not something I have to sort of debate with people and be like, do you think that getting hit in the head and people having long-term effects that ruin their lives is really a problem? Yes, it's a problem. So if you guys are interested in more stories that are going on, I'm definitely linking as many as I can. If you think of any others, have any opinions on them, please link them below or mention them. I'd love to hear back from you guys. I've heard back from just a few of you guys. You guys have asked me questions, asked me for more videos. I think that's really just for me, this is something I really love to do. That's really encouraging. And pretty much just comment whatever you want. If you didn't like something I said, please let me know, and we can not necessarily battle it out in the comments, but let's not have a reckless fight. Let's have a really one of those where we both throw off our gloves and we sort of square up against each other. Maybe just tangle onto each other. Let's just have a nice dance. Yeah, that's a good metaphor. Yeah, any interaction, guys. Also, if you like this, share it with your friends if you thought it was interesting. Hey, spread the word. Do whatever you guys like. Thank you so much. Your support and pretty much any feedback is always enjoyed. So thank you so much, guys. I hope to do more of these. I really wanted to do some videos on the World Juniors, but considering I've been having a lot of family issues recently, I haven't been able to watch all the games, especially the big games against Russia and Canada. So I will not be able to do reviews on those. Sucks. I will try to do them for the tournament. School's starting up again. I'm not sure. But thank you guys so much.